How do Windows, Linux, and macOS USB boot processes differ? Imagine trying to start a computer from a USB drive. Each operating system has its own way of making that happen, and understanding these differences can make installing or repairing your system much smoother. When you want to boot Windows from a USB, the process begins with creating a bootable drive that has Windows installation files. These files are usually copied from an ISO image onto a FAT32 or NTFS formatted USB drive. The drive needs an active primary partition and a bootloader that works with both older BIOS systems and newer UEFI firmware. To start the process, you enter the BIOS or UEFI settings by pressing keys like F12, ESC, or Delete during startup. Then you select the USB as the boot device. Once selected, the Windows Boot Manager loads, which then launches the Windows setup environment. This setup allows you to partition, format, and install Windows on your hard drive. Windows USB boot is popular for installing, repairing, or recovering the operating system. Linux handles USB boot a little differently. You create a bootable USB with a Linux distribution or installer, often using tools like Rufus, unetbootin, or the command line utility dd. The USB contains a bootloader such as GRUB or Syslinux, which supports both BIOS and UEFI systems. When you power on your computer, the firmware loads the bootloader from the USB. The bootloader then loads the Linux kernel and the initial RAM disk, which contains the core system files. Linux USB drives can run a full operating system without installing anything, making them perfect for testing, troubleshooting, or rescue work. Linux is very flexible, supporting many hardware types and configurations, and you can customize the setup extensively. macOS has a slightly different approach. To create a bootable USB installer, you use Apple's official tools like the Create Install Media command on a Mac. The USB drive must be formatted with a GID partition table and use APFS or HFS plus file systems compatible with macOS. Macs use FI firmware for booting, so to start from the USB, you hold down the Option key during startup. This brings up the boot menu, where you select the USB drive. The macOS bootloader then verifies the installer's integrity before launching the macOS recovery or installation environment. This process is mainly used for installing or reinstalling macOS on Apple hardware or for system recovery. The main differences come down to firmware support, bootloader types, and file system requirements. Windows and Linux support both legacy BIOS and UEFI, while macOS only uses FI. Windows uses the Windows Boot Manager, Linux typically uses GRUB or Syslinux, and macOS has its own proprietary FI bootloader. For file systems, Windows prefers FAT32 or NTFS, Linux often uses FAT32 or ISO 9660, and macOS needs APFS or HFS Plus with GPT partitioning. Creating tools vary too. Windows and Linux have many third-party options, but macOS requires Apple's official tools and must be done on a Mac. Knowing these differences helps you choose the right method for installing or repairing your operating system. Whether you are installing Windows, testing Linux, or reinstalling macOS, understanding how each system boots from USB can save you time and frustration.